The rope cut deep into her wrists as they dragged her across the dock. Her white wedding dress scraped over rough wood. The lake waited below, black and silent, like it had been hungry for years. Wind pushed her wet hair across her face, but she could still see the people standing there. People she had known her whole life, and none of them moved. Lillian Hart felt the cold boards beneath her knees as the men shoved her forward. Her father stood near the back of the crowd with his hat clutched in his shaking hands. He stared at the ground like it might open up and swallow him. "Please," she whispered, but the word vanished in the wind, and the lake was getting closer. The town of Red Hollow had been dying slowly for months. Wells dried up. Crops withered in the fields. Dust hung in the air like a curse that refused to leave. Then Reverend Josiah Mercer arrived. He came dressed in black from hat to boots, carrying a Bible in one hand and judgment in the other. Within weeks he was preaching about sin, punishment, and evil walking among good people. Soon he started saying a name, Lillian Hart. 3 days earlier, Lillian had just been the quiet girl who helped teach children their letters in the small schoolhouse beside the church. She lived with her father in a crooked cabin near the edge of town. Their land was poor, the roof leaked, and her father drank more whiskey than water. But it was still home. 3 days earlier, she had been preparing to marry a man named Silas Granger, not because she loved him, because her father owed him $600. "You'll marry him," her father had said without meeting her eyes. "It's the only way." Lillian had simply nodded. Women like her did not get choices. They got arrangements. But fate had different plans. During the rehearsal inside the church, Silas Granger suddenly clutched his chest. His face turned gray. He collapsed onto the wooden floor before anyone could reach him. Dead. Just like that. By morning, the preacher had his answer. Witchcraft. The wagon stopped with a violent jolt. Hands grabbed Lillian and yanked her down into the dirt. Her lips split when her face struck the ground. She tasted blood and dust as the crowd closed in around her. Farmers, mothers, children, neighbors. "Bring the witch forward," Reverend Mercer called. His voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife. He stepped onto the dock with slow, deliberate steps. His thin face held a smile that made Lillian's stomach twist. "The Lord has shown me the truth," he said loudly. "This woman carries a curse. Her barren womb has poisoned the land itself." "That ain't true," Lillian shouted. 2 men dragged her closer to the edge of the dock. "I was supposed to get married tomorrow. How would anyone know if I'm barren?" The preacher's smile widened. "The Lord knows." The crowd murmured. Some looked afraid. Some looked angry. Most simply looked relieved to have someone to blame. Lillian searched the crowd desperately. "Father." Her voice cracked. She found him standing near the general store. Daniel Hart looked like a man waiting for a storm to pass. His shoulders slumped forward. His eyes stayed locked on the dirt. He didn't move. Something inside her chest shattered. "You coward," she whispered, then louder. "You sold me to pay your debts, and now you're letting them kill me." Her father flinched, but he still said nothing. Reverend Mercer raised his hand. "She belongs to the devil," he declared, "and the water will judge her." A teenage boy stepped forward with a sack of stones. His hands trembled as he knelt beside her. "Eli," Lillian said softly. The boy froze. "I taught you how to read. Remember? You couldn't say the letter R." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Lillian." "Then don't do this." The preacher's shadow fell over them. "If the witch lives," Mercer said coldly, "your family will suffer the same fate." Eli swallowed hard, then tied the stones to her ankles. The weight pulled at her legs immediately. The lake rippled quietly beside the dock. Waiting. Lillian looked out at the crowd one last time. 50 faces. People who had once shared meals with her. People who had laughed beside her at town gatherings. Now they watched her like she was already dead. "I forgive you," she said quietly. The preacher struck her across the face. "You dare speak of forgiveness?" he snapped. Hands grabbed her arms. The dockboards creaked beneath their boots. "No!" Lillian screamed, thrashing wildly. "Please! I didn't do anything!" Quote. No one moved. No one spoke. For one brief moment, she hung in the air. Her ruined wedding dress fluttered around her like white wings. Then the lake swallowed her whole. The cold hit like a hammer. Water rushed into her nose and mouth as the stones dragged her downward. Darkness closed in instantly. She kicked desperately. Her bound wrists clawed uselessly at the rope. Above her, the surface of the lake looked like a distant patch of gray light. Her lungs burned. Her chest tightened. "This is how I die," she thought. Alone. Forgotten. Then through the muffled silence of the water, she heard something. Hoofbeats. Fast. Loud. Shouting. And a gunshot cracking across the sky. Miles away on the ridge overlooking the lake, a man had already seen everything. Cole Maverick sat tall in the saddle of his black stallion, watching the mob below with dark eyes. He had been in Red Hollow for 3 days, waiting to settle unfinished business with Silas Granger. But Silas Granger was already dead. Now the town had found a new problem to solve. Cole didn't like what he was seeing. "Boss," Elijah Turner muttered beside him. "They're gonna drown her." Cole watched the white dress vanish beneath the lake. Something old and buried twisted in his chest. He remembered another fire. Another day when no one had come to help. His jaw tightened. "Let's ride!" His stallion exploded down the ridge like thunder. Behind him, his men followed. The crowd at the lake barely had time to react before Cole rode straight through them. His horse skidded to a stop at the edge of the dock. Reverend Mercer spun around in outrage. "What is the meaning of?" Cole drew his revolver. The gunshot echoed across the lake. The bullet slammed into the wood inches from the preacher's ear. "Where is she?" Cole asked calmly. Mercer's face went pale. "The water is judging." Cole cocked the hammer again. "I asked where she is." The preacher slowly pointed toward the lake. Cole didn't hesitate. He threw off his gun belt and dove straight into the dark water. The lake swallowed him instantly. Cold, murky, blind. Cole kicked downward through the darkness, sweeping his hands through the water. His lungs began to burn. Then his fingers brushed fabric. Soft, floating. He grabbed it. A body. He found the rope at her ankles and pulled his knife free. 1 slash. 2. 3. The stones dropped away. Cole wrapped one arm around her waist and kicked toward the light. They burst through the surface together. Air tore into his lungs as he dragged her toward the shore. His men held the crowd back with rifles. Cole laid the girl on the ground. Her skin was pale, her lips blue. She wasn't breathing. "Come on," he muttered. He pressed on her chest. Nothing. He tilted her head back and forced air into her lungs. Once, twice, 3 times. Suddenly she coughed violently. Water spilled from her mouth as she rolled onto her side, gasping for air. Cole sat back on his heels. Alive. The girl opened her eyes. Bright green. Full of fear. "You're safe," he said quietly. She let out a broken laugh. "Safe?" she whispered. "Look around." Cole did. The crowd was gathering again, anger replacing shock. Reverend Mercer stepped forward. "You have interfered with God's judgment," the preacher declared. Cole rose slowly to his feet. "God ain't the one drowning women," he said. "You are." Mercer sneered. "She has no husband, no protector, no father willing to claim her." Cole glanced down at the trembling woman beside him. Something fierce burned behind those green eyes. Even after everything. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lillian," she whispered. "Lillian Hart." Cole nodded slowly. Then he turned back toward the crowd. "Well," he said, "that's easy to fix." The preacher frowned. "What do you mean?" Cole reached down and took Lillian's cold hand. "She's got a husband now." The crowd erupted in shocked shouts. Cole's voice cut through them like steel. "Reverend," he said calmly, "you're going to marry us." And Lillian Hart realized the stranger who had pulled her from death was about to change her life forever. The crowd exploded with angry voices. Men shouted. Women gasped. Someone threw a rock that skipped across the dock and splashed into the lake. Lillian Hart sat trembling on the ground, her wet dress clinging to her skin, her lungs still burning from the water she had swallowed. She stared up at the stranger holding her hand. Cole Maverick, the man who had just jumped into a lake to save a woman he had never met. "You can't be serious," she whispered. Cole's grip tightened slightly. "I'm very serious." Reverend Mercer stepped forward, fury twisting his narrow face. "This is blasphemy," he hissed. "You cannot simply claim a woman to escape judgment." Cole's gray eyes turned cold. "You want to test that theory?" His hand rested casually on the revolver at his hip. Behind him, half a dozen hardened ranch hands watched the crowd with rifles ready. These were not farmers or frightened townsfolk. These were men who had ridden through gunfights and cattle wars. The crowd felt it. The mood shifted. Mercer's voice lost a little of its thunder. "She is accused of murder," the preacher insisted. Cole shrugged. "I saw a man with a weak heart die. That ain't murder." "She cursed him!" "Then your God has strange taste in weapons." Laughter rippled through Cole's men. Mercer flushed red. "You cannot interfere with the moral law of this town." Cole looked down at Lillian again. She was still shaking, but her eyes had cleared. The fear in them had turned into something else. Defiance. "You want to live?" he asked quietly. Lillian stared at him. "If I say no?" He glanced at the lake. "They'll throw you back in." The crowd murmured again. Some looked uneasy now. Some looked ashamed. But no one stepped forward to stop the preacher. Cole squeezed her hand gently. "Marry me," he said. "Right now." Lillian swallowed. "You don't even know me. I know you didn't deserve what they did to you." "And that's enough?" "For now." She turned her head slowly. Her eyes moved across the crowd, the preacher watching with hatred, the townsfolk who had nearly drowned her, and finally her father. Daniel Hart stood frozen exactly where he had been before, hat in his hands, eyes on the dirt, still silent, still afraid. Lillian felt something inside her harden like stone. She turned back to Cole. "Yes," she said. The word was barely louder than the wind, but the dock fell silent. Cole nodded once. Then he looked at Reverend Mercer. "You heard the lady." Mercer's jaw clenched. "I will not perform such a mockery of—" Cole lifted his revolver and cocked the hammer. "You will," he said calmly, "or we'll ride to the sheriff in Laram and explain how you tried to drown an innocent woman." The preacher looked around. The crowd's courage was fading now. The ranch hands surrounding Cole were watching with steady eyes. Mercer swallowed. "Fine," he spat. The ceremony lasted less than a minute. The preacher spoke the words through clenched teeth. Lillian's voice trembled when she said, "I do." Cole's did not. "I pronounce you husband and wife," Mercer said flatly. Cole didn't wait another second. He bent down, lifted Lillian into his arms, and carried her toward his horse. "You can't just leave," someone shouted. "She still owes debts!" Cole swung into the saddle behind her. "Send me the bill," he called back. Then his voice dropped into something darker. "But if any of you ever touch my wife again—" He looked slowly across the crowd. "I'll come back and burn this town to the ground." No one answered. Cole kicked his horse forward, and just like that, Lillian Hart left Red Hollow forever. The ride lasted nearly 3 hours. Lillian leaned weakly against Cole's chest as the horse carried them across miles of dusty prairie. Her body still shook from the cold lake water. Every breath tasted like mud and fear. Cole wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally she did. "Why?" His voice rumbled quietly behind her. "Why? What? Why did you save me?" Cole was silent for several moments. Then he said quietly, "Because I know what it feels like." "Feels like what?" "To watch everyone you trust turn their backs." Lillian closed her eyes. She understood that feeling better than anyone. They rode in silence until the sun dipped low over the hills. When they crested the final ridge, Lillian gasped. Below them stretched a valley so green it looked unreal. Thousands of cattle grazed across rolling pasture, A river wound through the land like a silver ribbon, and on a hill in the center stood the largest ranch house she had ever seen. "What is this place?" she whispered. "Home," Cole said. "Blackstone Ranch." She stared at the massive stone house, the barns, the endless fields. "I grew up in a 2-room cabin." "You'll get used to this." Cole dismounted and helped her down. The moment her feet touched the ground, her legs collapsed. Cole caught her easily. "I can stand," she protested weakly. "No, you can't." Before she could argue, the front door of the ranch house burst open. A stout, gray-haired woman stormed down the steps. "Cole Maverick!" she shouted. "What in heaven's name have you done now?" Cole didn't even flinch. "Martha," he said calmly, "this is my wife." The woman stopped dead. "Your what?" "My wife." Martha turned slowly toward Lillian. Her sharp eyes took in the rope burns, the bruised cheek, the ruined wedding dress. Her expression softened instantly. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "You poor child." Lillian felt tears sting her eyes. It was the first kindness anyone had shown her in days. "Get her inside," Martha snapped suddenly. "She needs a bath, food, and sleep." Then she jabbed a finger at Cole. "And you are going to explain yourself." "Later," Cole said. "She's had enough for one day." Martha studied Lillian again, then nodded. "Come along, child." She guided Lillian inside. The house felt like a palace. Polished floors, tall ceilings, fireplaces burning with warm light. Lillian stumbled on the staircase. "When did you last eat?" Martha asked. "I don't remember." "And sleep?" "I don't remember that either." Martha muttered something about foolish men and led her to a bedroom larger than Lillian's entire cabin back home. A hot bath was already waiting. Lillian sank into the steaming water and closed her eyes. For the first time since the lake, her body stopped shaking. She scrubbed her skin desperately, trying to wash away the hands that had dragged her, the voices that had called her a witch, the water swirling red and brown in the tub. It didn't wash away the memories, but it helped. She had just finished dressing in clean clothes when shouting erupted outside. Lillian froze. Gunshots echoed across the ranch yard. Her heart began to race. Martha rushed into the room, pale. "Riders," she said. "A lot of them." "Who?" Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. "Red Hollow." Lillian's stomach turned to ice. "They followed us." "Stay here," Martha ordered. But Lillian was already moving. She stepped into the hallway. Voices drifted up from downstairs. Cole's voice, hard as iron. "You got no right to keep her," another man shouted. "She's accused of murder." "She's accused of breathing," Cole replied coldly. "Tell your preacher if he wants my wife." A long pause followed. Then Cole finished quietly. "He can come try to take her." Lillian stepped onto the staircase just in time to see the riders turning their horses and leaving the ranch. The threat had been delivered. War had begun. Cole turned and noticed her standing there. "I told you to stay upstairs." "I don't take orders," she said. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I'm starting to notice that." Lillian folded her arms tightly. "They won't stop, will they?" "No." "How many men does the preacher have?" "Maybe 20. "And you?" 40. The tension in the room thickened. Lillian met his eyes. "What happens now?" Cole's voice was calm. "Now we plan." But outside, the first sparks of war were already beginning to burn. The first fire came 3 nights later. Lillian woke to the smell of smoke. At first she thought it was part of a dream. Then she heard shouting outside the ranch house and the pounding of boots across the yard. She ran to the window. Orange flames roared against the dark sky. The north hay barn was burning. Men ran back and forth carrying buckets. Horses screamed in their stalls as sparks drifted through the night air. Lillian didn't hesitate. She pulled on a pair of boots and ran outside. Cole stood near the burning barn, his shirt covered in soot as he shouted orders. "Get the horses out first!" he barked. "Let the hay burn if you have to." Lillian grabbed a bucket and joined the line without saying a word. The heat from the flames burned her face. Her arms screamed with exhaustion as she passed bucket after bucket down the line. But she didn't stop. She wouldn't stop. This place had taken her in when she had nothing. It was her home now. 2 hours later, the fire finally died. The barn was gone. Black beams smoldered in the early dawn light. Cole stood staring at the ruins with his hands on his hips. Elijah Turner walked up beside him. "This wasn't an accident," the foreman said quietly. Cole didn't look away from the wreckage. "Crane." Elijah nodded. "Tracks heading east. 3 riders." Cole's jaw tightened. "Good." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Good?" "Means the preacher just declared war." Cole turned his head toward Lillian. She stood nearby, her hair loose, her clothes stained with soot. Her chest rose and fell as she caught her breath. But there was fire in her eyes now. Not fear. Fire. "This is war now," Cole said. Lillian nodded. "I know. Are you ready for that?" She thought about the lake, the stones tied to her ankles. The crowd, watching her drown. "I've been ready my whole life," she said quietly. "I just didn't know it yet." 3 days later, Cole placed a revolver in her hands. They stood behind the ranch house, where an old fence post served as a target. Lillian lifted the gun slowly. Her arms trembled from the weight. "Breathe," Cole said. She fired. The bullet slammed into the post. "Better," Cole admitted. "But you're flinching before you pull the trigger." "I am not." "You are." He stepped behind her and gently touched her shoulder. "Right there. You tense up." Lillian lowered the gun. "Maybe because the last time someone pointed one at me, they were trying to kill me." Cole didn't answer right away. Finally, he said quietly, "Fair point." She reloaded the revolver. "Show me again." Cole almost smiled. The attack came a week later. A rider burst into the ranch yard just after sunrise. His horse collapsed beneath him. "Ambush!" the man gasped. "Crane's men. They got the boss." Lillian's blood turned to ice. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Serenity Springs." The man coughed, blood staining his lips. "He's going to hang him at dawn." The world went silent. Lillian stood very still. "How long until dawn?" she asked. "Tomorrow." The man passed out. Elijah looked at her. "Mrs. Maverick." Lillian turned toward the ranch house. "Gather the men." 40 ranch hands filled the study minutes later. Some looked confused. Some looked skeptical. A large cowboy named Hicks stepped forward. "No offense, ma'am," he said carefully, "but what exactly do you think you're going to do?" Lillian met his eyes. "I'm going to bring my husband home." "With respect," Hicks continued, "you've been here less than a week." "You're right," Lillian said. "I don't know your land. I don't know your war." She paused. "But I do know what it feels like when everyone wants you dead." The room grew quiet. "And I know Cole Maverick jumped into a lake to save a woman he didn't know." Her voice hardened. "Are you telling me none of you would do the same for him?" Elijah stepped forward slowly. The lady asked a question. One by one, the men straightened. Hats came off. "What do you need, Mrs. Maverick?" Hicks asked quietly. Lillian's voice didn't waver. "Guns." "And every man willing to ride into hell." The rescue came before sunrise. They rode through the mountains in silence. Lillian led the group. 12 riders moving like ghosts through the dark. When the town of Red Hollow came into view, she felt her heart begin to pound. The church stood exactly where she remembered. The same place where Silas Granger had died. The same place where the witch hunt had begun. Cole was locked beneath it. They moved fast. 2 guards at the cellar door fell before they could shout. Lillian kicked the door open and rushed down the stairs. "Cole!" A voice answered from the darkness. "Lillian?" She found him chained to the wall, bruised, bloody, but alive. She broke the chains with shaking hands. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Too bad." Gunfire erupted outside. They ran for the door, but before they could reach the horses, a shot rang out. Pain exploded in Lillian's side. She collapsed. Cole caught her. Across the yard, Reverend Mercer stood holding a pistol. "The witch dies today," he said calmly. Lillian raised her revolver. Her vision blurred. Her hands shook. But she pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Mercer square in the chest. He stared at her in shock, then fell. The town went silent. Cole knelt beside her, pressing his hands against her wound. "Stay with me," he begged. Lillian managed a weak smile. "Did I get him?" "You did." "Good." Then the world went dark. She woke 3 days later. Cole sat beside the bed with his head in his hands. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Lillian," he whispered when she opened her eyes, "you scared the hell out of me." "Sorry," she said faintly. He laughed weakly. "You shot a preacher, rescued your husband, and nearly died." She smiled slightly. "Busy week." Months passed. Reverend Mercer's followers scattered after his death. The truth about the drought and the stolen land came out. The valley slowly healed, and the ranch grew stronger than ever. One evening, Lillian stood on the porch watching the sun sink behind the hills. Cole walked out carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. "Penny for your thoughts." "I was thinking about water," she said. "Funny thing to start a war over." Cole handed her a glass. "Nothing simple about the West." They stood together watching the sky turn gold. "No regrets?" he asked. Lillian thought about the lake, the rope, the moment she thought she would die alone. Then she looked at the man beside her. "No," she said softly. "Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to." Cole reached into his pocket. "I've got something for you." He opened a small box. Inside sat a gold ring with a green stone. "The first wedding was rushed," he said. "You deserve better." Lillian laughed quietly. "You mean a wedding where no one tries to drown me?" "That would be a good start." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "I love you, Cole Maverick." He pulled her into his arms. "I loved you the moment you said yes." The stars slowly appeared above the valley, and the girl they had once called a witch stood there as the strongest woman in the territory. Alive, free, and finally home. If you love Wild West stories filled with passion and heart, like this video and subscribe to Wild West Tales of Love for new stories every single day.